Hi everyone, my name is Antoine Godet. I'm a research associate with the Gold Fluid Window project at Université Laval. So the Gold Fluid Window project is a thematic project that started last summer actually, and hopefully it's going to go for the next 3 years. So the two leaders are Professors Carl Guillemette and Doc Tinkham. But actually it involves a lot of people. So namely, I'm not going to name everyone, but that involves a lot of people. Professors and HQP from the two universities, so Laval University and Laurentian University. And we have collaboration with UBC and university in Europe. So just to give you an idea of how did the project started. So to illustrate that, I wanted to show you that schematic picture or sketch from Damien Gaboury. With the anatomy of hydrothermal orogenic gold systems and the key parameters. So it can be divided in three major parts. So the first one is the rock source that contains a certain amount of fluid, a certain amount of ligand, a certain amount of gold. The second part is the channelway or the pathway. And finally, the third part are the precipitating mechanism. Everything is related with time, of course. But while a lot of people are focused on those different parts, there are not a lot of studies on the potential rock source for all those elements. So this is why we want to focus on that during the next 3 years. So to illustrate that, I wanted to show you what has been done so far. So on the left side, this is just an example. This is the result of ultra-low detection limit whole rock chemistry that has been developed by Jan Pitcairn. And as you can see, from green schist to unfibrillate facies, it seems to have at some point a certain amount of gold that is released in the system. So this is really nice because the ultra detection limit, the detection limit is around 0.02 ppb for gold. So we have a nice precision on that. On the other hand, people have done some forward phase EQR modeling. So those are just two nice examples. One from Tompkins, for example, where he tried to model the behavior of sulfur in the PT space during prograde metamorphism. But we can also think about tracking the fluid composition in terms of carbon dioxide, in terms of fluid, in terms of salinity. So those are stuff that we aim to do for the next 3 years. So what are the big questions we're going to try to answer? So the first one is, what are the pressure, temperature, time, chemistry, and deformation metamorphic conditions that are favorable to fluids that form orogenic deposits? This is a big question. Of course, it is related to the tectonic regime. So we're going to have to better understand what were the geodynamic regimes at that time. And we're going to try to answer that question: did the metasedimentary subprovince contribute as a source of gold, ligand, and fluid in the superior province? So the main objective is definitely to test if the fluid, gold, carbon, and sulfur comes from the metasedimentary provinces, define the PTT-XD evolution of the metasedimentary provinces, better understand the Neoarchean geodynamic settings, and what was the impact of the regional fluid generation and circulation on gold endowment. And at a smaller scale, characterize the mobility of key elements. We're talking about gold, sulfur, carbon during prograde metamorphism, and the mobility and source of volatile ligands and metal at the mineral scale. So the general concept of the Gold Fluid Window project. So thinking about a rock source that contains a certain amount of fluid, ligands, and gold that is expected to have followed a certain PT path with a certain shape at a certain rate along a certain metamorphic gradient. We can expect that metamorphic reactions were involved. And if we superimpose the reactions that were liberating some fluids, some ligands, and some gold, we can think about everything crossing at the same point. And this is what we call the Gold Fluid window. So this is the general concept of the project. So how we're going to do that? So this is the generic model for orogenic gold deposits. And what we're going to do, there are two different approaches. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that project because this is Benoit's talk just after me. But I wanted to illustrate that that we can look at the final products, typically orogenic type veins in endowed and less endowed areas, doing a lot of detailed petrography, and try to understand our rock fluid modeling, and trying to understand what could have been the sources. But we can also take a potential sources, in our case, the metasedimentary basin, and do some forward phase EQR modeling and trying to reconstruct what we observe in the field. So again, we're going to do that in endowed and less endowed areas, doing some petrography, geochemistry, geochron, and forward phase EQR modeling. So where we're going to do that? So we're going to do that in two subprovinces. So the first one is the Pontiac, located nearby the well-endowed area within the Abitibi that everybody knows. And we're going to do that in the Quetico subprovince, which is nearby less endowed areas, so we can compare. So who's going to do that? So I'm going to define the 4 projects in a couple of slides, but we have 3 different PhD students. So the first one is Isaac Siles-Malta at Laval University. So he's going to work on, he's actually working on the Pontiac subprovince. We have Adrian Rem, who started last year at Laurentian University, who's going to work on the Quetico subprovince. We have Diogo Ribeiro, a PhD located at Laval University, who just started last fall, actually, and who's going to compare the 2 provinces and myself. Okay, let me start with the first project. So this is the project of Isaac. So it's supervised by Carl Gilmet and involves a lot of people. And Isaac's going to focus on the Pontiac subprovince. So he went on the field and did some really nice field work in the Rouyn-Noranda area. And the main purpose of his project is to answer that question, where the gold-bearing fluids derived from the Pontiac metasedimentary rocks. So what we completed so far. So Isaac did the 2 field work seasons. So he was able to do a complete field season in 2 years ago, and last year we were able to go for a couple of days on the field. He visited a couple of outcrops, more than 100, collected more than 100 samples, did a compilation of every whole rock chemistry in the Pontiac subprovince, in the metasedimentary rocks. But what is interesting is that if you look at the maps over there, in blue pales, those are the metasedimentary rocks. It seems that it looks like the metamorphic grades is increasing from the north to south, from the biotite zone, crossing the field isograds of the garnet in to the sedimentite zone. So this is really important because we can have an idea of the prograde metamorphism crossing all those isograds. Isaac did also more than 100 sections. He completed some EPMA analysis in situ. And is still working on the geochronology of basically everything we can date. So we're talking about zircon, monazite, apatite, and garnet. Just to illustrate that, this is an example of thin sections. So as you can see, this is from the sterolite zone where you can observe garnet porphyroblast, sterolite porphyroblast with a biotite quartz plagioclase matrix. So what are the expected outcomes from Isaac's project? So the first one is a better understanding of the Neoarchean tectonic evolution of the Pontiac subprovince. So we're talking about PT conditions, we're talking about timing, we're talking about style of metamorphism, which is really important to get a good idea of geodynamic settings. To provide an insight of crystal scale fluid generation during Barrovian-like metamorphism along Barrovian type gradients, and better understanding of the first controls on the development of orogenic mineralization. So what are the next steps for Isaac? So he's currently doing some phase EQR modeling on the metapelites that are really really representative of each metamorphic zones to get the PT conditions and the PTT path. He's gonna then trying to model the meta-wakis that represent, I would say, 90% of the rocks within the Pontiac. And we're gonna get a really good idea of what could have been the volume of fluid generated and when and where in the PT space. And we're gonna try to interpret the UPBs, icon, monazite, and apatite, and Newtonian affinum Garnet dating, and that's gonna give us an absolute timing of the major reactions of interest. So the second project started last September actually. So this is Adrian Rem from Laurentian University, supervised by Doug Tinkham and Carl Gilmet. And Adrian is going to work on the Quetico subprovince. So Adrian is going to try to answer those questions. So first of all, did the metamorphic devolatilization of the Quetico metasedimentary rocks produce fluids and metals that are required for gold mineralization? Are there spatial variations in terms of PTTX conditions? And what was the geodynamic setting of the Quetico subprovince? So to do that, that involves complete methodologies. So we're talking about fieldwork, geological mapping, detailed petrography, hard rock chemistry, mineral chemistry, using both the probe and the laser. His projects involve a lot of phase AQR modeling and dating, basically everything we can date. So we're talking about lutetium, hafnium, garnet, coupled with uranium, lead, zircon, monazite, titanite, rutile, apatite. Just to give you an overview of what we did last September. So we were able to go on the field, which was really, really great. So we went on the western Quetico. So to give you an idea, this is Thunder Bay. This is Atikokian. And we decided to do some transects crossing the entire Quetico subprovince. So every black dot is in outcrop. So we visited more than 300 outcrops. And we were able to define the field isograd. So starting from the south, you're increasing the metamorphic grades from the chlorite to biotite, garnet, etc., to the partial melting at the center of the province. And this is almost symmetrical. And then you expect to cross the isograd to the north. So the Quetico, to give you an idea, the Quetico is primarily composed of wakis with some interlayered metapelites. We were also able to identify some conformable pilot basalts. We also identified some lapilli-tuff, and we have really nice field relationships from different intrusive. We're talking about granodiorite, we're talking about granite, monzonite, and cyanite. So yeah, this is another illustration. So this is an example of sillimanite porphyroblast in a metapelitic rock. So the work plan for the next year for Adrian is pursue the petrography work, doing some rock chemistry, and starting the phase AQR modeling. So we are not only talking about PT sort of sections, but we are also talking about temperature, chemical section, for example, using both softwares, Thermocalc and Tariac Domino. And hopefully we're gonna go again on the field. So not focusing only on that part of the Quetico, but moving to the center part near the Geraldton area. The third project is the project of Diogo Ribeiro, who is a PhD student who started last fall at Laval University. So he's supervised by Bertrand Rottier here at Laval. And Diogo is going to try to investigate the methyl sulfur chlorine mobility during the metamorphism and try to understand what is the implications for gold. So the research questions. First of all, what type of fluid? So I'm not only talking about qualitative, but quantitative characterization of the fluids is produced during prograde metamorphism of large Neoarchean metasedimentary basins. So this is a major question. What elements are mobile? So we can try to track gold, sulfur, chlorine, for example, and what is the chemical evolution of migrating metamorphic fluids. Quantitative approach. So the main objectives are constrain the element's mobility across the isogrades, model the chemical and isotopic composition of the fluids during prograde metamorphic devolatilization, so contribute to the general understanding, assess the potential of the metasediments in the Quetico and the Pontiac subprovinces as sources of sulfur, chlorine, base metal, and gold. Track the metamorphic reactions that are responsible for those releases, and determine the chemical and isotopic evolution of transposed metamorphic vein that we can find. So the approach is really focusing on the metasedimentary rocks involving all rock chemistry, but also the ultra-low detection limit gold analysis. But we can also think about other metals or other elements, not only gold. Doing in situ mineral chemistry using the probe and the laser, and involving a lot of stable and radiogenic isotopes, both in bulk and in situ analysis. So we're talking about hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, etc. Is going to try to characterize the chemistry of vein cross-cutting or transposing the metamorphic rocks in each metamorphic zone. Doing some, again, in situ mineral chemistry and isotopes. So it's going to try to quantify the element's mobility during metamorphism, identification of associated reaction again, and modeling the chemical and isotopic composition of the generated fluid. So the next steps for Diogo are basically, he's going to do his first field season, looking at both the Pontiac and the Quetico rocks. And that's going to involve, after that, a lot of hard rock chemistry and hopefully starting with the ultra-low detection limit chemistry. Finally, the fourth project is called the Magmatic Contribution that I'm going to do in collaboration with different people. So to illustrate that, this is the geological map of the Pontiac. This is Rwanda, this is Malartic. And as you can see on that geological map, in pale blue, you have all the metasedimentary rocks, but you can observe that there are a lot of intrusive rocks from different colors, so from different age and from different composition. And one of the major questions we're going to try to answer is what the impact of the magmatic intrusions on the gold fluid window. So we're going to do that both in the Pontiac and the Quetico. Is there synchronous magmatism during prograde metamorphism? So we're going to date them using both uranium, lead, and lutetium, hafnium geochronology when possible. We're going to try to characterize the type of magmatism in terms of chemistry, and that's going to lead to what tectonic environment was involved using the split stream. And we're going to test the isotope composition, what is the proportion of magmatic volatiles inside the metamorphic background, test the impact of those magmatic intrusions on the gold fluid window. So just to give you an idea, we were able to go on the field last year. So we went in the Pontiac for a couple of days or weeks. So we have nice field relationships. So this is an example within the Dussel batholiths where you have a nice enclave of the Pontiac metawakis. So this is an S-type granite. So we were able to sample more than 12 geochron samples, but also pegmatite for stable isotopes analysis. And this is another field example from the Quetico subprovince. I would say this is a classical outcrop, really beautifully exposed along the roads, where you can observe deformed metawakis that are verticalized. You can observe the presence of pre-tectonic granodiorite seals and the syn to post-tectonic S-type granite that are composed of biotite, muscovite, and garnet. So what's going to be the next steps for that project? So a new field season in the Quetico. A lot of chemistry. So we're talking about hard rock chemistry. We're talking about micro XRF scanning of thin sections. I'm going to do hopefully in the next 1 or 2 months the geochronology, acquiring at the same time the trace elements for Zycon, for example. We are currently analyzing the stable isotopes, and hopefully we're going to start writing something. So this is my final slide. So all the contributions that hopefully we're going to do after the 3 years or during the 3 years. So technical reports, peer review publications that hopefully we're going to start writing this year. And we aim to participate to different conferences, international like the GA or more local like Quebec Min and the GACMAC. So I thank you for your attention.
Great, thank you very much, Antoine. Are there questions? There is a question in the chat room. Are you going to try to date the conformable volcanic rocks in the Quetico? They would give you a direct deposition age for the metasedimentary rocks, and to Zuzi's knowledge, that would be the first time in the Quetico.
Yeah, it is something we can think about for sure, and compare that with the sediments. Why not?
Okay, Bruno.
Yeah, just a brief question, Antoine. Like it seems like the projects follow are very similar for the Quetico and the Pontiac.
Mm-hmm.
The Pontiac is known with the Abitibi to be enriched in gold deposits. There's several gold deposits, but it's not the same for the Quetico. There is some gold deposit within the Wabigum, but it's certainly not the same endowment than in the Pontiac. So it's more like in the Pontiac you had the ideal condition, you had the gold window, but you might not have it in the Quetico. So I mean it's more a question of optics in terms of in the Pontiac is getting that the condition right for that gold window, but in the Quetico it might be looking for why didn't the Quetico produce as much gold?
Yeah, I definitely agree. But this is, I would say, the force of doing that in both sedimentary provinces, so that we can compare. And there are a lot of different factors. I'm talking about the metamorphic style, the metamorphic shape. I'm talking about the rock source that contain or not gold at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're going to try to answer that. I agree with you. And just even inside the Quetico, this is a really long subprovince, more than 1,000 kilometers long. And there are some parts that are definitely far away from endowed areas. And there are some parts, I'm thinking about the Geraldton transect, that are more close to the Geraldton area, so to the endowed area. So we can think about comparing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
May I supplement this? In the sense that that's part of the idea is to compare better endowed and less endowed areas in the superior. So that's one of the motivation for doing these two. We would have done others too, if possible, but mm-hmm. That's the start.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other live questions? There's one here from on the chat room. Bruce Yardley's review suggested early prograde metamorphism does not in many cases create sufficient fluid volumes rapidly enough to be linked to mineralization, but that rapid fluid generation during late syntectonic uplift and decompression is more favorable. Can you comment on this?
No, no, I can't comment on that for the moment.
Okay, no worries.
I'm not that aware of that.
Okay, and anything else in the audience?
Well, I would just say that exactly the point of the project is to find the conditions in which there is formation of enough fluid at the right time, in the right composition to make or to be related to the gold deposits. So that's exactly the question we are trying to solve.
Yep, very good, thank you.